Got a hole in my arm. Look at that. Just have a nubbin there. It got chopped off. Hi, my little flavors. Welcome to another episode of the Motley Stew Show, where we try to look past the talking points, listen to little more than a soundbite, and take one foot outside the echo chamber and see what's really going on. Taking another gap week in the Get to Know Your Candidate series, this week we're going to dive into symbols and why it matters where they came from as much as what they mean today. Anyone watching the news in the last week knows of the terrible tragedy that happened down in South Carolina when 21-year-old white male Dylann Roof opened fire near the end of a study group and killed 9 black people inside of that church. A study group that he actually sat all the way through from beginning to the near end, and said later on when he was confessing that he almost didn't kill those people because they were so nice. But he did kill them. And why? Because they were black. In the shock-laden hours after this tragedy surfaced, some sources were desperate to point the blame in another direction because it didn't fit their narrative that racism is gone. Those people, like Fox News, wanted to point to this being an attack on Christianity because it took place in a church, but that had nothing to do with it. In quick time, Roof's personal manifesto surfaced, and it spelled out in crystal clear detail that the attack was based on race, and what he was trying to do was start a race war. Their color made them targets, not their faith. This disturbing act poured more than just gasoline on the fire of discussing race relations in this country. It burned a whole layer of it away. In numerous photos found online, Roof posed with the Confederate battle flag, which most people refer to as the Confederate flag, even though it never was the national flag of the Confederate Army. That flag actually took a few forms, like this. The popular design that most people cling to as the Confederate flag is actually the battle flag of the Northern Virginia Army under General Lee. It was actually rejected as the national flag. But in the news of the last few days, that's not really the point. The point is what it means to people today. As this flag became the popular icon of the Confederate Army, it also took on the meaning of what the South was fighting for, to stop the abolition of slavery. These states formed together in a desperate attempt to form a second America, one where slavery was allowed to keep going and thrive. Now you can look through Civil War history and find hundreds if not thousands of examples of different specific things that people were fighting for in the South. Even black American soldiers who were conscripted into the Confederate Army under the pretense that they would get freedom when it was over. But slavery was still the backbone reason for the war, and that's what most people remember today. Some people see that flag and it's a reminder of their history, of how their ancestors were brought here, how they were treated, and how they were owned. Obviously, I can't view that flag through their lens, but I can empathize, and I do. And for those people who also don't see through that lens and actively disagree with it, it's worth taking into account the words of the man who actually designed the flag, William T. Thompson. As a national emblem, it is significant of our higher cause, the cause of a superior race, and a higher civilization contending against the ignorance, infidelity, and barbarism. Another merit in the new flag is that it bears no resemblance to the now infamous banner of the Yankee Vandals. As a people, we are fighting to maintain the heaven-ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race. A white flag would thus be emblematical of our cause. Now that second one was actually about this flag, which you can see has a large white portion. Eventually that flag was not used because when seen from far away it looked too much like a truce flag. After the massacre at the church and the images of Dylann Roof glamorizing this flag in photo after photo, it reignited the fuse in the argument of whether or not this flag should be flown above Capitol buildings, state buildings, and federal buildings. Now this is not the first time that argument has come up, but the ferocity and intensity of it this time around has sent many defenders running for the hills. And while politicians were trying to figure out how to articulate their stance, private corporations moved swiftly, in fact, frighteningly so, to show where they stood. Walmart, Amazon, Etsy, eBay, Sears, Kmart have all pulled any merchandise bearing the Confederate flag. Even Warner Brothers has said they will stop producing the General E. Lee because of the flag on the roof of the car from the Dukes of Hazzard. Now, Walmart was the first one to issue this stance, and when it did, the sale of Confederate flag merchandise on Amazon went up almost 3,000% because people saw the writing on the wall. which brings the discussion into two separate realms: free speech and government speech. These are not two equal things. The removal of this flag from government buildings is not only the right thing to do, it is sorely overdue. As a valid piece of history, it belongs in museums, it belongs in textbooks, it belongs in the same place that Jeb Bush moved it to in 2001 very quietly when he was governor of Florida. And it absolutely does not belong today on any building that is paid for by taxes, either in the state government or the federal government. Now, in the realm of free speech, private corporations have the right to choose what they want to sell and what they don't. They do it every single day. But what bothers me is the speediness of how these companies came to that decision. It smacks of reactionary thinking. It smacks of fear of bad PR. And it seems to lack any conscious thought of what the meaning is behind what they're doing. The spokesman for eBay said this: "It has become a contemporary symbol of divisiveness and racism." For some people that is true, but you know what also is divisive and racist? This copy of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This copy of The Jew at Home, or this charming piece of history. I'm not even going to mention the Nazi memorabilia. I mean, there's just too much of it. Coming on the heel of all those other companies, Apple also decided to pull every game out of their app market that had the Confederate flag in it. But that incredibly reactionary step was met with so much backlash that Apple quickly backstepped and said they would leave in those games where the Civil War flag was used in historical context. Now, I don't know what games might have been using this flag in a non-historical context, but I imagine if there was just some racist rebel flag waving game where you just ran around killing black people, that app shouldn't have been in the App Store to begin with. Oh, and of course, games with swastikas all over it, those are still fine. Actually, let's stop for a minute and talk about the swastika. It is impossible for an American in this generation or anyone with even the slightest knowledge of World War II to look at this symbol and not think of World War II, Hitler, the Nazi regime, and the Third Reich. You would think this is as powerful, if not more powerful, of a racist and divisive symbol than the Confederate flag. But the difference lies in its origin. The battle flag and other symbols of the Civil War were designed in tandem with racism, with that undercurrent of what they meant. They were there to defend the white race and the white privilege over all others. Yet the earliest incarnation of the swastika was found in 10,000 BCE, carved into a mammoth tusk, somewhere out in the Ukraine. Later, it was seen as an object of good luck and auspiciousness in Hinduism and Buddhism, among other ancient belief systems. By the time Hitler had used it, it had been around for a dozen millennia. But his horrible reframing of the swastika is irreversible, and it is still used today by modern-day neo-Nazi groups. Yet in India, it holds on to its original meaning and is still shown on flags to bring people luck and goodwill. Now, I'm not saying we should ignore the Nazi connection and start decorating our living rooms and front porches with streamers covered in swastikas, but I think it shows a clear difference between the two. Now, bringing it back to those private stores, I've never been a huge fan of this Confederate flag. But if it's such a divisive symbol now, why wasn't it one before Dylann Roof killed all those people? This was flown loud and proud during the heyday of the civil rights movement to show the people who were against it. But now, only now, nearly 50 years later, because of one insanely terrible incident, now it's become a symbol that has to be eradicated. You couldn't find a terrible incident before this to prove the case? I'm pretty sure there's a few examples back there in time begging to show this flag as being un-American. Lastly, does Dylann Roof prove that this country is still racist as an institution? No, absolutely not. He's one guy who read insane crap on the internet and followed it blindly. But also, does Dylann Roof being a lone wolf prove that the country is not racist and we're past it? Still no. Hell no. He has no relevance to the weight of historical racism, slavery, and how this country was built on their backs and then they were locked outside the gates to watch it grow without them. The levels of segregation at every turn that were alive in this country not even 2 generations ago, and ignoring the fact of how that set up the system that we see today and the rampant disparity, is to completely ignore the sacrifices and even the lives of people like Dr. King and what they did. So it brings me to the question for this week. What do you think of the flag? Should it be removed from government buildings and state houses? Should it be removed everywhere from private companies? Or should it be left alone? Or is it part of one and part of the other? And what do you think about other symbols of racism? Should they be given the same treatment? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. So thanks again for watching another episode of the Motley Stew Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do so now. Actually, you can do it whenever you want. I mean, the button works 24/7. You can also like, favorite, and share this to anyone you think might want to join in the conversation. Stay tuned for next week, and as always, a little bit of Logan.
Okay, ready? Yeah! Okay, tell me when. Now, kick, kick, kick. Get around it! Well, you gotta kick. Come on. Kick, kick, kick. Good job. You did it. You ready to go back to the stairs? Go back in. You ready? Yeah. Kick. Good job. Yellow. No, those stay there, Logan. Those are wrong kind of bubbles. Logan.
Logan, come on, back in the pool.
Are you dripping? No. Feet first. Feet first. Not your head. Turn around. No, turn around. Stand up. Stand up. Turn around. We'll go feet first. Feet in the pool first. We'll work on that. There you go. Come on. Good job.
Taking another gap week in the Get to Know Your Candidate section. Section? That's right. It's 21. Let's try that again. Hi, my little flavors. Welcome to another... see? Still can't get that one right. Not on the first try, at least.